that time again. It must be a Tuesday.
Must it though?
It must be beer o'clock.
It is.
Here we are. David, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well.
Good. Welcome to Brewing Controversy, folks. I'm Lucas. This is my hetero life mate and drinking buddy, David. And we are here to do what we do best, the nature of our relationship, to drink craft beer and bitch and moan as lost wandering leftists in a hellscape of absolute Armageddon.
Very hellscape.
And so if you're joining us for the first time, the way this works is we will hit up a few hot takes. We will talk about a pet topic of one of ours. Today it's me. And then we're going to dig into the big discussion. We do have a guest coming up, so stay tuned. You will have a 3-person banter and bitch session on hand. And you can join the banter and bitching by dropping in comments on whatever platform you're on. We're live on YouTube and Facebook, so feel free to jump into the discussion and say hello when you pop in, and we'll throw you on the screen and say hello back. So here we are, somehow halfway through May, and it's weird because it seems like it's been like forever since we started the pandemic journey, but then like New Year's was yesterday. It's a bizarre time warp in my head. So it's finally becoming.
It feels like literally the last 4 months have just like been on nitro.
It's finally becoming spring or something like it. And
I think I want to say part of it is, it seemed like 4 years of Trump went by so quickly. And I feel like part of that was because we just kept on leaping from crisis to crisis to crisis, yes. Right? And then the pandemic slammed everything on hold, right? Because the only crisis of any note was the pandemic.
Right.
And now that the pandemic's over, we're back to crisis after crisis after crisis after crisis. So
kind of, but the crises are happening to us in more frequency than they were happening by our hand. And I say our as a person that didn't vote for the person responsible for much of the chaos. But, we don't wake up anymore looking through our fingers at what the dumb fuck has said. But we do look through our fingers with regard to what's coming around the corner. Speaking of your outlook, Rob's here. He says hello by saying that he is California bound.
Yeah,
according to all the latest banter on social media, he has sold his place and is going to leave the South, and good for him. The nice thing about Rob heading to California is now we're talking about figuring out how to go see WrestleMania. So maybe I'll make my first trip to LA in the form of being a mark. What's on our mind today? Let's see. Hot take quickies. So we try to keep these short. We're actually talking about getting a timer because we keep bantering for too long, but we're going to hit these up and knock them out. There's a few topics of the day, headlines, etc. I'll kick off one real quick because it's so easy to knock out. Is this baby formula shit has really been tanning my ass, and it's tanning my ass partly because it gives these fucking idiots another thing to crow about. These fucking Q cultists. I've heard it all from, Biden created this shortage to keep us all in fear and control, to they've taken all the baby formula and sent it to the border for all the illegal kids. It bothers me on the level of that, but it also bothers me because of who I picture on the other side of the social media bubble on my screen. You've got these basic ass, well-to-do white bitches that drive gigantic SUVs, send their kids to private school. They married a surgeon. They don't work a day in their lives, and they chose not to breastfeed because image and reasons. They don't have to work a job where there's no place to pump. They're not in any kind of hardship. They're just out there using up the supply and all of their white basic bitch privilege. And they're sitting there with their fucking Starbucks in one hand, poking out lies and repeating shit from Tucker Carlson, on the internet. And that mental image really pisses me off. Now, to be fair, at the other end, I'm definitely not here for any sanctimonious hippie bitches trying to say, told you so, with absolutely no sensitivity to other people's situations with regard to the need to use formula. Right down the middle, where formula actually is needed, it's a problem. It's a legitimate problem. It's not anything social that anybody should crow about. It's a fucking factory that fucked up. It's an example of why consumer rights matter, and consolidation of all these brands and industries is bullshit, because now just one of them fails miserably and we've got what, a crisis.
Yeah, and I think
real quick, Olivia's here and she was just speaking to that. So hey, how you doing, Olivia? Incredibly over people that literally cannot comprehend how the FDA works and think the Abbott plant should have just reopened.
And I'm going to touch on something real fast, and we may kind of get into it a little bit in our big topic, but I want to touch on it directly in relation to this, which is, one of the reasons that we're seeing the inflation that we are is because we've been in this process of deindustrializing the country, and one of the consequences of that deindustrialization has been there's no competition to Abbott, right?
Yeah.
Everything else has to be imported. So, all right, if everything else has to be imported, then that works great as long as the supply chain is working great. Well, what happens if the supply chain doesn't work great? Well, now we have a serious issue because we have a domestic monopoly that's only challenged by foreign imports that we can't get anymore. So the deindustrialization of the U.S. that would have enabled competitors to exist to create and supply formula to the market and could have picked up the slack from Abbott when Abbott started killing kids because of their negligence. This shouldn't be a problem. What the reason we find ourselves in this spot is because of the greed of the investors of, well, you've got to lower your costs. You've got to lower your costs. You've got to lower your costs. You've got to lower your costs until, well, the only place you can open a factory is in China because China won't enforce any rules. Coincidentally, we can't even import formula from China, however, because the lead levels in the formula are too high. Lead.
Yeah. But meanwhile, we have rules against that, and we won't fix our fucking pipes in half of the American cities.
Right.
The other thing that really pisses me off is the snotty bullshit regulations that America tends to enforce against European goods. There's a lot of blockading of European formula that's perfectly reasonable.
Yeah.
But like so many other fucking things, we have to throw some bureaucratic horse shit that long outdates Biden or Trump, I might add.
Yeah,
but it didn't fucking help that Trump didn't properly fund or manage the FDA, and they don't have enough fucking people in the baby formula team.
No, they don't. And the only reason there's the blockade on European pharmaceuticals and European because it's technically considered it falls under pharmaceutical products. Formula does. The only reason there's a blockade is because the European Union and European nations actually have their laws are stricter than ours, but they managed to produce it so much cheaper, right? Even within the most developed, in terms of per capita, every European nation is more developed than the U.S. per capita.
Yeah, and
even despite that, they can still make these things cheaper than we make them in the U.S. somehow. Mm-hmm. Because, they have laws that prevent them from being as greedy as they could.
Speaking of fake news, we had another fake-ism that you brought up, David. A conservative fake history. This one was up your butt today. Tell us about that.
So, I'm going back to Alito's abortion decision, and the crux of his argument.
Let's hold on to the word draft as long as we can.
Fine. His draft decision, although apparently there's no other decision being circulated inside the court, is what the rumors say, that this is the decision. It's just, it needed to be fixed of typos. I don't know. No, he has this entire thing about, there are no rights that are not historically, consistent in America. And of all people to teach me something about history, Alyssa Milano, right? Where out of left field did this shit come from?
Really? I haven't heard about this.
So she put up a little PSA explaining how this happened, because I hadn't really thought about. I knew that immediately after the Civil War there were laws to ban abortion. What I didn't know was why I never heard of them before. Because, Alito tries to talk about these laws banning abortion before the Civil War, and you go look at them, I'm like, is that really banning abortion? I don't know what this is doing. What the point Alyssa Milano makes, and it makes everything begins to make perfect sense after this. Who is in charge of women's gynecological health up before the 1860s? Midwives.
Okay.
So we didn't have laws banning abortion because midwives just simply said, we'll take care of it. There was no ironically, it was a deregulated sector.
Okay.
Controlled by midwives who, if a woman needed an abortion, the fact that Benjamin Franklin included in America's first textbook.
We just don't. We just handle it. We just don't talk about it. We have the doula do the thinga.
Right. And that's how it went. And the thing that changed was after the Civil War, and you had these doctors coming back who justifiably saying that was bad. Coming back from these field hospitals and these army camps where people were dying of disease and being like, that was bad. We should not have done that. We need to do something different. And then trying to institutionalize things. And then they look at, oh, well, while we're at it, I don't know if I like the idea of abortion.
The beginning of corporate medicine, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And what through, ironically, by trying to make things better for women, they made things so much very worse.
Better in the opinion of,
Well, I mean, clean hospitals are I think we can all agree are a good thing, right?
That's fair.
Having professional standards for doctors, I think we can all agree are good things.
Fair enough. Sharma's here. Hey, lady.
Hey, Sharma.
The brew is good. We'll tell you all about it here in a minute. And Brian is here. Aloha, sir.
So, I mean, this made up history that Alito has wandering around. I'm over it, man. I mean, because and even if you take this one step further, this idea that next thing Alito's going to be saying is that blacks were happy in slavery.
I mean, people try to say that. So
exactly, but there's historical precedent. I'm a Supreme Court justice, dude.
Yeah, right. Take your minstrel logic and get the fuck out. So while you're all worked up, David, let me ask you about the news. If you've seen the latest desperate play by your favorite guy, of course, I'm talking about boner alert.
So when I was getting all my hair cut off today,
Elon Musk,
I actually got to explain what had happened and why Musk had basically screwed himself, because Musk is a fucking idiot every day of the week. That ends in Y. Like why I ask that Musk even exists in the way that he does. Basically, here's what happened. I mean, and most people don't understand how this deal worked out. So Musk shows up to the board and he says, I'll pay $3 over the share price at close. So on the day they pull the trigger, whatever the share price is, plus $3 on every share. Okay, that's a pretty good offer. Normally, we're talking about 50 cents on the share, $1 on the share. $3 is enough. It was, I think, that because that's what really pushed the board over and made this a done deal. Was the board was like, $3? Hell yeah, I'll do that. The problem is, how does Musk get this money? Because Musk, I'm the richest man in the world. You're the richest man in the world when it comes to owning stock. You have the most assets as a singular individual on the planet. You don't have $45 billion in cash. So how are you going to buy these shares? Well, typically in these situations, what you do is a swap, right? I give you shares and cash valued up to what I would owe you per share, right? That's how that would work. It's called a share swap. And people, that's how that normally works. But in order for Musk to make this happen, he had to offer it as cash. And that's a big deal. When you make a cash offer, that's a big deal. So how is Musk going to get the cash? Well, he has to borrow it because if the thing is, he needs his Tesla shares. Why does he need his Tesla shares? Because he's borrowing against the value of his Tesla shares. His Tesla shares are the collateral.
I mean, he's essentially offered more money than he's got, and he can't figure out where to get it.
No, that's not the issue. It's how expensive the deal is getting. Because the problem is that Tesla shares began to fall, right? So now he has to offer more Tesla shares in order to secure the loan. On the other hand, Twitter shares began to rise. Why? Because I know I'm going to get a payout off this share. Daddy Musk is going to pay me money for whatever the share is.
Ironically, he raised the share price by running his mouth.
Yeah, and so on top of that, you end up with the Fed rate hike. So now I have to put forward even more shares to secure an even bigger loan because it has more interest.
Well, and now his latest play of trying to wreck the deal if they can't prove a certain percentage of like fake accounts or bots or something, like it's just constantly a new set of edgelord spectrum logic from this fucker.
He needed to, and I explained this to when I was getting my haircut, because I was explaining this to the hairdresser. Like, first of all, I knew he was going to do this because it was going to get too expensive. Once the Fed raised the rate, it's over. It's too expensive for him to put, because he would basically have to put all his shares on the line and then find the money to pay the bank back. Right? Or he would lose those shares.
Yeah.
Which he's not going to do. So I hope he, I almost hope he gets stuck with it too. So,
I mean, I've already stopped using it on a daily basis, and I'm prepared to, rage quit, at least theatrically, and not look back. I'm going to relegate it to my the status of my LiveJournal account, which apparently I still have from 18 years ago as of today.
Well, conservatives have been doing that, saying like, "Oh, I'm going to go on the Truth Social Network as soon as it gets a web app." Of course, Truth.
Whatever.
You're just like, what, you launched? I didn't realize this, that you launched without a web app. Are you serious? The literal easiest part of this entire equation, I know from developing an application, the easiest part of doing this, you didn't do.
Right. Rob's ready for Google Plus. I don't think that's going to come back.
No, that's not going to happen. But I mean, at the end of the day, Musk.
I would regress to LiveJournal in MySpace at this point. Fuck it.
I mean, at the end of the day, he did this to stay in the news.
That
was his key thing. Yeah. SpaceX wasn't grabbing the headlines that he wanted. Tesla hasn't come out with anything new. No one cares about his personal life other than he's a fucking weirdo who doesn't even take care of his family, which is just shocking. He needed to get in the news. That was it.
Fair enough. Well, speaking of,
you know what, Brian
says Ask Jeeves should return.
I would support a return for Ask Jeeves.
Well, we have Jeeves. Jeeves has apparently had a daughter named Siri. That's how it worked. Hey, speaking of rockets and Musk, NATO, you were digging in on this NATO expansion topic, and I'm honestly, what is it, Finland that wants in?
Oh, no, it's not just Finland. Hold on.
It's hysteria. It is hysterical to me that dumb fuck Putin started all this trouble over his fears about NATO growing, and he's caused at least in Finland, the public opinion went from 30 in favor to 70% in favor of joining NATO.
Oh, no, it's worse. It's worse because Finland and Sweden have a deal. If where one goes, the other goes. So one of the most historically neutral nations in Europe is also signing up for NATO. That's how they work. They've made an informal agreement for 50 years that if Finland was to join NATO, Sweden's going to join NATO. If Finland was going to join the Warsaw Pact, Sweden was going to join the Warsaw Pact. So they're both joining NATO. And with that, I want to point out, we get some really cool toys that are made because the Swedes, the Swedes actually have a really great armaments industry. that makes a bunch of really cool stuff. Everyone uses one of their big shoulder-mounted weapons. It's called the Carl Gustaf, and everyone just calls it something different, but it's all made by the same company in Sweden, where they call it the Carl Gustaf. It's basically the modern version of the bazooka, and we get all sorts of nifty stuff. And we got to thank Putin for finally convincing some of the most neutral nations in the world that we need to sign on to protect democracy and freedom.
Yeah, he's going to galvanize everybody against him.
And I also want to respond to Brian's comment real fast here about Turkey. That's
what we get for pressing the same buttons at the same time.
Okay, I'm moving away. Carl Gustaf. So I'm going to put it up. Turkey. This is what happens with Turkey. Turkey doesn't have a lot of things, and since there's war in Ukraine, Turkey has half a country that is majority population that doesn't want to be Turks, and about a third of what's left after that who doesn't want to be ruled by central Turkey. And then somewhere in the mix, you have a bunch of Orthodox Christians, and then some angry Cypriots on the north part of a tiny island. That's what Turkey's got. There's not enough trade through the Bosporus, which is the strait that Turkey controls between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. There's not enough trade, especially when there's a war on, for them to have any pull anyplace else. What happens when Turkey does these things is Turkey shows up and they say, give us something. We have some pull someplace. Finally, give us something.
Right.
So that's what they're asking for. They're asking for us to like either money or some tanks. Apparently, one of the things they might be looking at is a lot of Sweden has a significant number of Kurdish Workers' Party members in their country, and Turkey, again, since half the country is populated by people who would rather not be part of Turkey, they would like those members of the Kurdish Workers' Party to not be in Sweden. So that's probably what the play is that they want.
Well, shifting gears to the last hot take, I just want to drop a local news update. Apparently, the City Commission here in Grand Rapids is having a special meeting, which appears to be a budget meeting. I really didn't keep up with the schedule because I knew I'd want to be on our full broadcast tonight. But the news this morning was that several commission members had vandalism at their homes by activists. And once I dug through enough of the shockingly shitty, I came from Nashville where the media is pretty shitty, but I'm even surprised at how shitty the journalism in Grand Rapids is. And once I read enough different pieces.
Was it a Susan Collins?
Do what?
Was it a Susan Collins? The chalk, the sidewalk chalk.
Oh, it wasn't quite chalk, but it was spray paint, but with stencils, and it was at the driveway transition plate of the concrete, which is the city's property. But the media was reporting it as vandalism, which is a little bit of a stretch. Now, the one guy who I think is the biggest problem on the commission, and unfortunately also makes the best booze, John O'Connor, he's the big bootlicker, the white businessman, the obvious problematic element. He had a brick in his yard at the edge of the sidewalk that had an article from the news talking about Patrick Lyoya's death, rubber banded to it, and Lyoya's name was circled, and it was written on there, "His blood is on your hands." It was set in his yard. It wasn't thrown in his yard. It was set in his yard. The media's horrifically shitty job of covering this, they aren't pointing out that the vandalism was in the public right-of-way, or pointing out that it's obvious that if you set a brick in someone's yard, that's a way of saying this could be meant for your window, but we're exercising restraint.
Yeah.
So there's been no dialogue whatsoever about any of that. So anyway, we do have some comments coming in about the election. We're going to do an election update. There are primaries tonight. We'll do that here in a bit. But Right now, it's time to check in on the other important thing that we do on Tuesday, and that is the beer. It's time for What You Drinking? And I totally need to move this topic out of the way so that we can talk about beer. David, what you
So
drinking?
I've got Westbrook's Mexican Cake, Imperial Stout. It's a sweet stout. I
Okay.
mean, that's it.
Is it a good sweet stout?
It's average.
All
I
right.
mean, it's. I think the problem is they make this big deal about all these other ingredients they add in, like vanilla and I think they make a point of like there's some sort of other lactose flavors involved in this, but really the cacao nibs just sort of beat everything over the head and leave them, place them gently like a newspaper article wrapped around a brick.
I feel like a lot of these beer descriptions right now, like we got through the hipster IPA craze, right? We got past the point that people like me were sick of hearing about it and didn't like it, and didn't want to talk about it. And then people like me got with people like you that taught us how to appreciate and understand IPA. And now it's no longer the hipster thing. So I'm willing to really try to look at it. I think now the hip thing is to have lactose in your beer and to talk about it in the description. And vanilla seems to come up a hell of a lot in beers lately. And I think we're talking about it's like talking specs. It's like tech nerds talking specs. It's like the cool thing now to be able to talk about the lactose, even if it's not even obvious.
Well, and I'll tell you, one of the things that tweaks me about a lot of the times when they do that, there's whoops, accidentally knocked my camera. There is an outfit called Edmund Oast, and they have just some amazing artwork on their cans, and their descriptions of their beer are just great. And then you drink them, and I'm recently the store got some more in. They have some more variety. I didn't pick it up this time. I may try next week or the week after to grab some, because it's not really selling off the shelves that much. Because once people have one, they're like, "Huh, well, I mean, it doesn't suck."
Right.
I mean, and here's the thing with Westbrook. Westbrook normally falls under, at least Westbrook, I feel like doesn't overpay for their graphics. I'll give them that.
Why is it Mexican cake though? You didn't say anything that made me think Mexican cake.
No, it's a chocolate stout with better bitter than most chocolate stouts. Most chocolate stouts run towards the sweet. This has a little bit more bitter than sweet. It's Westbrook. I mean, the only thing Westbrook does that really like stands out in my mind is when they go nuts for fruit flavors and sugars and really try and punch up something that's going to have a different flavor than the bitter finish, because they do a pretty good job at that light bitter finish without having to do an over the top bitter. I mean, it's more bitter than some other chocolate stouts that I've had slightly, and it has a middling sweet note, but it's just, yeah. I mean, it's good.
Oh.
If someone offered it to me, I wouldn't, turn it down if I saw it at the bar and there weren't, better options like Wiseacre. I'd take it.
Well, I will see your Mexican and raise you a very white guy beer. In part of the support here at the end with Elk Brewing closing, I picked up a 6-pack of their Kolsch, which is cold break. They have a really great branding scheme, so I definitely like and approve of how they do all their cans. There's a uniformity and a brand to it, or how they did, and there was a uniformity. Anyway, it's exactly what you'd expect. It's a Kolsch. It's fine. It's a Kolsch. I wanted to have these on hand for the people that might come over that say, "Oh, I've only ever had Budweiser." Well, here.
Yeah, I mean that's an easy transition.
Try this. And it's not bad. I would go. I've actually been nursing it for the sake of the broadcast timing, but I would, chug this thing after cutting the grass. I mean, it's a decent. It's definitely better than a lot of Kolsch's. I've had some where I'm like, God, that's so skanky. And I would like to drop a comment in from Olivia. Out of beer, but got some Chardonnay. The maid of honor yoinked from the bar at the wedding 10 weeks ago. And Brian, I am ready for you, sir. I came prepared for you. Brian, a minute ago, he jumped in and said, cake? Me too. So as Brian has been doing for us, he's brought us a full update on what he's smoking tonight. And Brian, I came prepared. You're too wordy, so I can't show it all at the same time. But I brought you a little special something. There you go. We've now got a graphic for Brian's weed update. So, yeah, there you go. Now you understand that there's a word count. You're going to break it up into 2 paragraphs and all that good shit. But anyway, there's the rundown, which I think they go hand in hand to some extent. There's plenty of THC in one hand, alcohol in the other, parties going on. And hooray! Yeah, I thought you might like that. It was the most American weed representation I could come up with.
We're patriots.
Exactly, patriots of the right sort. So speaking of patriots, we got a guest coming in the door. So you guys have seen him in the comments a few times. You've seen him with us here on screen a couple times. And Mark made a suggestion to us, so we decided to add him in tonight. Hey, Mark, what's up, man?
Not much. Just chilling, listening to you two talk till y'all call me in.
Good to see you, dude. You get credit for kind of low-key lobbying for tonight's big topic, but we wanted to bring you in on my pet topic, and then we'll get into the big topic. What you drinking?
I have sweet tea with 2 shots of Fireball in it, in a mason jar.
I think we should call that the David tea, because David's Fireball.
Except I would never. The only way I ever refer to it is as my white trash whiskey.
There you go.
Can I please have some of my white trash whiskey? Thank you.
Right.
Okay. This is nothing. Because here's the thing. Growing up in Tennessee, we have Jack. We have tons of Jack. And let me explain to you.
That's because the distillery is 6 miles from my house.
Right. And here's the problem with Jack. Jack is horrible. It is awful whiskey. It is so bad. Even unless you're willing to pay like way up there for it, I'll take Jim Beam at least, because even if it's not good, it's better than Jack. And so the problem is, whenever anyone orders a shot of whiskey or a whiskey drink here in Tennessee, it's always with Jack.
But you're kind of comparing the lower end of not even really the lower end, but you're comparing a bourbon to a Tennessee whiskey. You're comparing a bourbon to a Lincoln. I would compare Uncle Nearest, where those who know their booze history know that that's really where it comes from. There are plenty of options. No, they're not as cheap.
White Lightning,
you're absolutely right that Jack is kind of the Coca-Cola.
I've got no problem with White Lightning. White Lightning is fine, right? And for those of you who don't know what White Lightning is unaged whiskey. I have no problem with Scotch, which is properly aged whiskey. I have a problem when they take a bunch of corn and they try and make whiskey out of it and put it in charred barrels, and it tastes like ass. There is no. I mean, there's this whole thing about like, oh, we take all this corn and we show it. Listen, you can make corn whiskey, and White Lightning is a great example of that, right? You can make unaged corn whiskey, and it's great. You can make aged corn whiskey, and you can make it good, but you're going to need to do some things to it. Charring the barrel and making it even more sour is not high on my list of this sounds like a great idea. No.
This is why you should just be a bourbon drinker and forget about other other breeds of whiskey.
Bourbon is fine. I mean, I have no problem with straight bourbon on the rocks.
And bourbon's corn done right. I mean, bourbon to be bourbon has to be mostly corn. So, you know.
Right. Well, and they don't char the barrels. They treat the product differently, and it comes out just fine. It comes out smooth. It doesn't come out super sour.
The barrels can be burned barrels, but it's not the same bullshit.
No.
Alicia's here saying hello by way of corn. Just for you. Let's jump in real quick and do a poll check. We talked about that we would do this, so let's take a peek at the current status of things, because there's a lot of interesting news. Just running down from the top, we've got a good grief. Just a North Carolina is just a trouncing in the Democrat side of the fence. Beasley is 83% so far, only 34% in for Senate. But the big news in North Carolina, Mark, you want to take that one?
Yeah. So with 46% of the vote in, Cawthorn is currently down 7 points against Chuck Edwards.
Apparently, the conservative base is not interested in gimps in women's underwear face banging their frat bros.
And I gotta say, I'm disappointed in that, because I wanted Cawthorn to win the primary so that we could have a chance against him in the general.
That's fair. But he's such a little snot that I can't help but enjoy watching him lose.
No, I don't want him to have a chance in the primary, because if he gets a chance in the primary, he's going to get all the Trumplicans to back him, and he'll.
But he's going to turn off. He's going to turn off so many other people that it opens the way for the Democrat.
Maybe.
Now, on the other hand, there is a split side to this, which is maybe the Trumplicans won't show up for anyone not Cawthorn. Maybe that offers an opportunity. So I mean, there's pluses and minuses either way. Tell me how Fetterman's doing.
I'll have to scroll to that.
Fetterman 22% in. Fetterman is 54. Lamb is at 30.
There we go.
That's good.
And by the way, if anyone knows anything about the Fetterman campaign right now, I personally want to wish him the speediest of recoveries. Apparently, he's getting a pacemaker installed.
Installed.
I mean, hell, he's already built like the damn Terminator. Might as well cyborg that up.
Which state is it that has the guy that won his primary and he's currently on trial for murdering his wife?
Illinois.
Okay, thank you.
So on the other side,
Illinois? No, West Virginia. It's West Virginia.
Okay,
I was wrong. It was West Virginia. I'd be like, Illinois doesn't make any sense. Oh wait, it's West Virginia.
On the other side of the Pennsylvania fence, we have the Republican primary for Senate, where Dr. Oz, Trump's butt buddy, is currently failing miserably with it's only 4% in, but he's well behind McCormick. I don't know if McCormick's more mainstream.
McCormick is more mainstream.
As long as it's somebody that Fetterman can pound around like Loki pissing off the Hulk, I'm happy.
I mean, here's the thing. I think the Republicans have kind of resigned themselves to this in Pennsylvania. If Oz or Burnett win, they lose the center to Fetterman, right? If McCormick wins, they lose the Trumplicans, and they don't get they're not going to get the turnout that they need in the rural counties. Fetterman's going to pull the cities no matter what.
Oh yeah.
So Fetterman is going to pull central Pittsburgh. And one of the strange ironies of Pittsburgh, you really have to look at downtown Pittsburgh, because somehow the steel mills at the edge like to kind of think that they're Republicans for some reason. I don't understand why. Like, you all are in a union. I don't understand why you all don't vote Democrat. But they don't like immigrants or black people or gay people, so they're going to vote Republican.
Shoot themselves in the ass from a labor perspective.
Yeah. So Fetterman takes downtown Pittsburgh. He takes downtown Harrisburg. He takes Philly, probably the Philly suburbs, and he takes anything bordering New Jersey. and that's the ball game,
Yeah.
right?
Rob points out Barnett might be splitting the Trumper votes from Oz, which is, I mean, that's just
exactly.
basically bad strategy to begin with. I'm going to be talking about strategy a little bit here in my pet topic. But
I mean, you have two Trumpers running against each other in the primary. So as someone, I'll tell this story, and I'll try and be brief. Me and this other guy were both trying to convince this woman to go home with one of us, and at some point she's like, "Oh, can someone walk? From where we were, can someone walk me home?" We were both like, "Yep, I'll do it." And like he followed, and my friend told me later, he's like, it was like two monkeys with a shotgun, man. He was gonna, you all were just gonna blow his brains out. None of you all were gonna go home with that girl that night.
Right.
So I mean that's what it looks like with these two characters. Is no matter who wins, the Republicans lose.
Olivia points out that mentally processing Dr. Oz running for office is yeah. Well, you would have said the same about Trump, right? And look what happened. It's fake TV, like fake doctor on TV, fake business mogul on TV. That's what these people fall for from their trailer parks.
I mean, at least the last celebrity we had in office with Reagan, as much as I didn't agree with all of his stuff, at least he was sane.
For a minute. That's the thing. He actually wasn't sane. That was the problem. Is he had a bunch of people behind him backfilling him being insane, right? And Reagan was used to being fed lines, so he wasn't going to go off the cuff.
But that's the thing. If you can have a puppet, kind of George W. Bush, right? If you can have a puppet that's only so capable of occupying the role, but they can be filled in the background with a staff.
I mean, like no one looked at W and said, "Oh my God, he's such a radical." Why? Because you had all these people in the background trying to, even if they were being assholes about something, smoothing it over and working to deliver that message in a way that wasn't awful, right?
Right.
The problem with Trump is that Trump didn't have it wasn't going to be handled at all. No one was going to. Right. I mean, apparently, people were still trying to handle him. I guess it's lucky that we didn't have the massacre of.
There it is, right there, Brian. That's it, right there.
Reagan was an actor. He was great at portraying a president.
Yeah.
Well, this all kind of gets into strategy and having your shit together. And I brought this up pre-show and created quite the ruckus. So I'm looking forward to our internal debate as well as the commentary here. And if David lets me talk long enough, I'll present the whole thing first, and then we can dive in. But here's where I'm at. I've been really pissed off lately that the left can't seem to understand a hierarchy of priorities. So we had the thing with Biden finally admitting that we need to be assholes and learn how to fight, that the good old days have gone away. And part of that is learning how to pick the right fucking fight, pick the right battle. And when I saw the news about that crazy bitch in Alabama signing the anti-trans kid law, I went right back to the thinking of all this petty shit that we see play out. The reason that I subdivide woke into the harmful, toxic woke and the useful, noble woke is because they are separate things. Woke is not all good. Woke is not as a whole a positive movement. Woke applied correctly is important. And I see all these people bitch and moan and cry and whine because they went to the grocery store and used their clearly feminine voice with their clearly feminine walk, and then they screamed at a cashier because they didn't call them sir. Okay, that's not that big of a problem. Ask the trans kids in Alabama right about now. So we've spent so much time on this superficial horse shit that we're looking the other way when the legislatures do crazy shit. And it kind of figures into the whole deal, right? Like, let's go be wrapped up on nitpicky little pronoun arguments, or this breed of woke is superior to that breed of woke, or whatever erroneous goofball under 40 fucking bullshit movement the left is up to, while the government literally does horrible shit And we tempt all of these assholes into getting worse and worse and worse and worse. The more we fight the petty battles that don't really have any effect on anything, the more we get Trumps. We got Trump by doing this kind of shit. And we still haven't learned our lesson, and we still don't have the sack to tell any other leftists that they're wrong and they need to sit down and wait their fucking turn while we go fight real bigger battles. And I'm hoping we're seeing an era where that's getting driven home, but I don't know. So there you have it. That's my cranky take on my fellow leftist spectrum.
Is it my turn now, Lucas? Is it my turn now?
Feel free.
Okay, then. Here we go.
I'm going to roll some comments in while you talk.
Here's the problem. You're saying that what you're basically doing is, if I were to define the right by the Buffalo shooter, or like the entirety of the Republican Party by the Buffalo shooter, or I don't know, by David Duke, that would be unfair, wouldn't it? I mean, I could look at them and be like, why do you tolerate this person? And they'll be like, But here's the thing. We on the left really look at these people as it stands and say, was that helpful? And we do that. I think the what you're pointing out, and you're creating scenarios out of anecdote rather than, hey, this person actually hurt someone. And the thing is, you're sounding kind of Republican-ish. I'm going to be honest, because it's not that, hey, we have an epidemic of people losing their jobs because they did. Before the show, you were talking about pronouns. No one's losing their job over pronouns generally.
Well, we weren't saying
right?
losing their job. We were
well,
talking
I know,
about.
but I'm saying, however, people are losing their jobs over being trans. People are losing their homes, their health care, their basic civil rights over being trans. That's an issue. Now, the question that arises to my mind is, for the average person and their circumstance, what can they do to resist this? Every little bit helps. Sometimes it's as simple as, the French made a point of continuing to use Third Republic stamps in Nazi occupied territories. Small things, right? Small things. The woman who would stand outside Bush's ranch in Texas with a sign about her dead son from Iraq. Not a huge thing.
You're bringing up noble examples that don't even begin to compare to harassing actors on Twitter because they didn't bother to say the right pronouns.
They're noble because we accepted them as noble. What I'm saying is, what's something small that this person can do to resist? Well, hey, could you please call me by my appropriate pronouns? I know someone who I consistently, on occasion, fuck up their pronouns.
That would be small and noble, David, but instead we have videos of people screaming at electronics employees because they fucked up a pronoun. What good does that do us?
Okay, that's not good. However, it does. The thing is, you're putting it on par with people being gunned down or people being fired or people being thrown out of their homes. I don't think that's an equal.
Let's give Mark a fighting chance here.
Yeah, sorry, Mark.
I disagree with your assessment of what Lucas is saying. Okay, so I agree with you. There are people that are losing their jobs for being trans, or there's people, for their sexual orientation or for their gender orientation.
Yeah.
Okay, that is something we should be focused on. The problem is, and what I think Lucas is trying to say, is that there are more people focused on, hey, you didn't put they, them in your Twitter bio, than they are the fact that people are getting fired and marginalized for it. And I've seen it happen. There are people on Twitter who are getting bullied and harassed because they don't feel the need to put their pronouns in their profile.
And
that's not where the focus should be.
But I'm saying
the focus should be.
Is that a widespread issue?
It seems to be.
It's pretty damn widespread, homeboy.
I really
a lot
doubt.
of people watch movies and TV and engage in those conversations. And when you have the other side seeing that as the discourse, because that's what happens.
But no, but
They think we're all crazed,
I mean, you're
and then they
picking
go to
and
the polls
choosing.
and elect fuckers like Cawthorn.
You're
But
picking
you're-
and choosing the discourse. I think is the problem. Is because I'm going to really push back on you on this, because you're picking and choosing. Which is, if this was a widespread issue, I should be seeing Fox News broadcasting that day and night. They
You do.
don't.
It's called Tucker Carlson.
was talking about it last night.
Tucker Carlson is broadcasting even worse stuff about replacement theory.
But
Which
Tucker
is how we
can
got
get
Buffalo.
that to his audience and make them believe it, because when they opened Twitter, all they saw were woke people bitching about tiny little
They don't
factors.
see woke people. You see woke people because that's how the algorithm works. They don't see woke people in that same way.
These people go hunt down the hashtags of
it's
their
not-
enemies.
at the end of the
You're
day-
saying that there's this active mob that's going out and doing these things, and you've said, oh well, you're in your academic bubble. I mean, we have fairly similar friend lists on Facebook. I'm
Yeah,
not
but-
seeing this. I don't use
You
Twitter.
don't have some of the exposure to some of the petty pop
Here-
culture types that I see. Go for it, Mark.
So
But
okay,
that's-
and again, I think, and because I'm listening to both of you, I think David is oversimplifying what Lucas is saying. The problem isn't. Here's where the problem is. If I go into and I've had it happen to me. If I accidentally call somebody that's standing in front of me at my job, ma'am.
Yep.
Okay. It is better for them to go, you know what? I actually prefer sir, as opposed to, I'm not a woman.
Right.
That's the problem. There
But
are people yelling and screaming at people in the service industry for mislabeling them when they are
please.
but
Oh,
and
come
and
to
I
me.
work in the service industry, okay? So there are people that are yelling at screaming at people in the service industry, not just for that, just for all kinds of
Okay,
shit.
I-
because
I-
the
I-
service
okay, as
industry
someone who
gets shit
also
on
works-
daily.
As someone who also works in the service industry, I'm going to be honest. I see a shit ton of people every day, and honestly, when I've hosted up, I've never had someone yell at me. But on the other hand, I'm also usually the one who's trying to make their day better. Right, is part of my job. Because I'm maitre d', I'm there to fix problems. I'm not there to necessarily bring them their food or take their order. In fact, if they ask me to take their order, I'm more than likely going to send their server back to the table. I'm not going to take their order. As a general rule, so it might be a little bit different. But on the other hand, when I hose it up, it's normally like, well, I would really. They may be very forceful about it. I would prefer to be referred to as ma'am. I'm like, oh, I apologize. And we just move right past it. I don't feel offended. I think one of the things that you're experiencing, and something that I'm used to dealing with with customers, and Lucas may be feeling this the same way, is the one thing that I find that a lot of people don't like to feel is either guilty or embarrassed, right? That's the one thing I never want to have a customer feel, is guilty or embarrassed about doing something when they're breaking the rules. Because it's my job to say, hey, I understand that your party expanded, but I really can't have you sit here anymore. There's too many people at this table. Can I move you to another table, or can we rearrange these seats in a way that makes it work better? I've had to stand there and be like, I understand that you wanted your burger that way, but we either can't do that, or looking at, having been standing there when they gave their order, been like, I apologize, ma'am. There might have been a miscommunication. I don't think we took your order that way, which is my nice way of saying you didn't order it that way. So I'm very used to that idea of, and that to me is a big impetus for a lot of conservatives, is they don't like feeling embarrassed or guilty about things. I feel like a lot of their behavior is based upon that avoidance of embarrassment or guilt. I don't feel embarrassed or guilty when I screw up someone's pronouns, even if they're yelling at me. And there's a good reason why. It's because it's very easily remedied. I just have to switch the pronoun.
Right.
A mistake was made. But I mean,
Sure, David, it is
But the point
because
is,
you're a private citizen that minds his own business and you're not a public figure. Actors and people on the internet get dragged, and even people with very minor notoriety get dragged for the smallest of missteps and have their lives ruined over petty shit like this. And then the right sees that. The right doesn't see you being polite. The right doesn't see the video of the lady the lady or gentleman who asked you nicely to correct your pronoun. The right sees the hysteria. And Olivia points out, we're talking about just this Twitterverse. But the fact of the reality we live in is all the social media bubbles are the bubble.
Your reality. But that's the problem.
No,
I'm trying
they
to say
are the bubble, David.
But no, I mean, again,
You can be above it. She can be above it. It doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the mainstream majority of ways of interpreting other human beings.
And again,
now.
you're making an assertion that this is a mainstream interpretation without any evidence that it's mainstream interpretation other than your impression. That's kind of my issue with
billions of users worldwide.
Okay, I've got an example because I just remembered who it was. So Gina Carano, when Gina Carano added her pronouns to her profile on Twitter, okay, like everybody was praising her. And I'm not even going there. Don't even go into that. Just go into the fact that she added her pronouns and
because she needs damage control like nobody's business.
I'm not going into
the fact, David, that you're ready to have that separate fight demonstrates the lack of priorities I'm talking about on the left. Go ahead.
Now,
hold on.
Hang on, stop. I'm not going into how.
Sorry, I apologize, Mark. I'm going to give you time.
Okay.
I apologize.
So she put her pronouns in her profile, and Pedro Pascal made a post. Somebody asked Pedro Pascal why he hadn't changed his pronouns in his profile, and then spent 2 weeks dragging him on Twitter for not putting his pronouns in his profile. And he even came out and said, I approve her doing it. She can do it all she wants to. I don't feel the need to. And people gave him shit for it for almost a month. That should not be the priority. The priority should be passing laws that go against that trans law that got passed in Alabama.
Okay. So it's not the priority. It's your perception of the priority. And that's the problem.
Perception is reality.
It's not anyone's priority.
Perception is reality.
No, it is.
Yes, it is.
In this instance,
perception is reality.
It really is reality.
David, this is a branding and messaging problem. Occupy had no idea what the fuck they were doing. They failed miserably.
Don't even bring Occupy into this because those guys were just fucking morons.
Defund the police is a dog shit slogan that needed more than 20 minutes of evaluation before it became a hashtag, and it didn't, and now look where we are. There are plenty of times when the left jumps to some bullshit trendy thing that makes the right freak out, and then you get Dr.
Because the right is going to freak out no matter what. I mean, I'm going to...
Not true. The right freaking out about 9/11 and rewarding the failure of Bush with another term is not at all the same as the right raiding the Capitol.
Because Lucas, you seem to be falling into this trap where the right creates a crisis out of little tiny twigs and tries to build a castle out of them. And the problem is that they'll do it with anything. And you keep on falling into that.
They weren't doing it, David. They weren't doing it like this. Brian said something earlier about guardrails, which I saved and didn't lean into at the moment because it was much more relevant to summary of this.
And before you go into that real fast, I also want to come back to: are we seriously using Gina Carano as an example?
No, I wasn't. Like I said, ignore how horrible of a human being that she is.
The fact that you can't get past that to have this discussion, David, is my whole point.
She changed her pronouns on Twitter.
Lucas, if you're using Gina Carano as an example, you might as well be using the National Enquirer as a factual source.
But the man in the corner of the screen didn't use her as an example. You've invented the need to be able to say that, so you're behaving exactly the way I'm describing the problem.
What?
It was okay. It was the instance that I could cite. Okay. And again,
that's the problem. This is all anecdotal. It's entirely anecdotal.
No, it's not. It happened.
Of course it happened. It's just anecdotal.
It's anecdotal if you ignore millions of fans.
And millions of fans commented and supported this. Millions.
How
Millions.
many people do you think
millions.
watch
You might have
Star
to
Wars,
go back 'cause
David?
it was last
Globally.
year.
I mean, but I'm asking, did millions of fans jump on board this movement, or did a couple of dozen Twitter users decide to make this an issue? Which was it?
You're talking about a conversation exposed to millions of fans globally on networks that have billions of users. These are problematic discussions to allow to be spun out of control, and we're bad about controlling it. The right is good about controlling it.
Oh my
Brian
God, the
pointed
right
out-
is good about controlling it? No, the right is
Yeah,
good
they
about
are. They have seized into the CRT narrative and they own that motherfucker, and we don't seem capable of rebutting it.
No, we can rebut it. We just don't. And that's the problem. Is instead of nutting up and saying, no, you're wrong, and you're a bad person for trying to put this forward. No. We keep on trying to fall back into, well, no, let's try and find a compromise. There is no compromise with this. It's one of the things that I think people don't sometimes get when you're selling something. And you and I had a little bit of a conversation about this last week about one of the problems that Democrats seem to have when talking to people who aren't naturally inclined to vote for the modern Democratic Party is they're trying to rely on numbers and facts and figures. They are selling a high-end piece of equipment at that point. They're not trying to make you feel anything about it. They're trying to sell it on the value and virtue of what you're buying. Now, if you have a piece of shit and you're trying to sell it to someone at arguably a lower price, usually, hopefully a lower price, then you rely on how someone feels about the thing, right? And I know I've done both, right? I've sold nice things and I've rested on the numbers, and I've sold awful things and I've rested on how it makes you feel and how I want you to feel about buying it. And one of the things that the Republicans are really good at is making you feel something about buying that awful thing. They're better salesmen for selling that awful thing. And Democrats can't seem to turn it around and say, I need you to feel good about the thing that is obviously better. Because the thinking is, the rational thinking is, of course, that you should already feel good. You have the superior product. You have the better knife, the better television, the better car, the better phone. All these are borne out by the numbers.
So Brian pointed out the core thing here, driving by the guardrails. And the problem in this is that the right has figured out how to make driving by the guardrails pay off because they never had a long-term interest in what was good for the country.
No.
The left can't figure out how to make short-term gains by driving by the guardrails, and then can't also figure out how to stand up for anything extreme to make it work in long-term favor. So it's all fucked, and it's fucked because the conversation is fucked, and whether you want to admit it or not, the conversation is taking place in social media.
By some people, maybe at that
No,
point,
by a fuck ton of people, homeboy.
well, by your evaluation of how to gauge what is and what is really not really happening, apparently we also need to investigate whether or not Hillary Clinton is drinking the blood of children for their adrenochrome.
No, we don't.
No, okay. There's a difference between that stupid.
Well, no, but a
bullshit
bunch of
and
people
being
said it
harassed.
on social
Okay.
media, right? A bunch of people
Yeah.
said it on social media.
The people
that
that
Hillary
say
Clinton
that
was drinking
shit
the blood of
only come
children.
out of the
There's a
woodwork
difference-
because they
there's a
think that
difference
we are
between people
literally
saying-
doing these things.
So there's a difference between people saying that Hillary drinks children's blood and people harassing people for not putting their pronouns in their profile.
And people
when the more important battle, instead of 6,000 people harassing Pedro Pascal, about putting his pronouns, those 6,000 people should go out and fucking vote against anti-trans legislation.
Okay, and this is where maybe we're talking at cross purposes. I agree with you.
Then why are you arguing? Because that's Lucas's point.
No, I agree with you that they
That's
should go out.
Lucas's point.
But here's the thing is, I don't think this is really an issue. Is the main problem?
It is.
You won't.
You
keep on thinking
you
this is
obviously
an issue.
haven't seen it,
But
it is.
David, it's an issue because these people don't actually put their energy into the right shit. The people that have the time,
have witnessed
the people that have the time to go harass people online should be taking that energy and going to their city commission like the people sitting downtown here at Grand Rapids. And you know what's sad? That
That would be
crowd is
ideal.
3 times as large as it ever was, and it took somebody getting killed to do it. That's also a blemish on the left. It shouldn't have taken somebody getting killed to do it. But because we're so fucking sloppy about talking about our issues, we couldn't get it across to a greater population until people die.
Oh no! Here's the thing. I'm not going to disagree with you that we're sloppy about talking about our issues. That's obvious.
And we're not
I'm
willing to
going
tell
disagree
people
with you.
that are off track to shut the fuck up and sit
But
down
here's
and
the
wait
thing: is
to turn.
you're talking about what I would argue is a minority of a minority of a minority of a minority.
Not true.
And I think that reality bears that out, that you have people who can scream really loud on Twitter, but it's some random person in a closet in Burbank. It's not the people in Cawthorn's district. It's not the people in all these. I mean, you're talking about. I think you're talking about a phenomenon that is built out of the universality of social media, in that it can draw from anywhere. And one of the things that we're going to be talking about later is, and we have to talk about later when we're talking about the Buffalo shooter, is, are there that many Nazis among us? And the
Yes.
answer probably is no. But I mean, realistically, when the FBI did a deep dive and a deep investigation, there's probably no more than, say, 1,000 members globally of Atomwaffen Division.
David,
But
I want to pull a quote out of one of my favorite movies. Now we must all fear evil men, but there is another kind of evil that we must fear most, and that is the indifference of good men.
which I want to point
The
out is a
Boondock Saints quote is
bastardization
from
of
something else.
Edmund Burke's quote, which is, "The good must combine and associate, or else."
So anyway,
one
back to
by
what I was
one.
saying was, when we on the left don't tell the ones that are nuts to shut the fuck up and stay focused, we're fucking up the fight.
I just don't
And
think it's
I'm
that
an
big.
asshole when I do it, because I'm a minority. That's the only few that are willing to say, okay, Junior, hold your fucking petty issues. We got shit in Alabama that we need to handle. Okay, Junior, wait a minute. We need to talk about abortion for a second. You're going to have to put your shit on hold.
I think that there's a more constructive way to approach
It's called
this.
incrementalism, and people want to bitch about it all the time.
I think there's a more constructive way to approach this, which is, hey, I get the you have an issue with pronouns, but can I talk to you about helping to defeat the Republican in your district? Can I? I mean, there's a more constructive way than being like, shut the fuck up and sit down. The problem is that when you approach, again, no one likes to feel embarrassed or guilty, and when you approach the situation like that, they feel embarrassed and guilty, or you're trying to encourage that embarrassment or guilt to get them to stop. Right? You're wrong. And if you tell someone you're wrong, what's the first thing? I should either feel bad that I've done something wrong or guilty that I've done something
David,
wrong.
it doesn't do any good. I have seen 10 to 15 years of trying to level with people on the left and explain, yes, that would be great. That's important. That's a utopian goal that we can all shoot for. But right now, we need to make sure we can all still vote.
No, I mean, here's the problem. They're nutters, and that's just built into the system, dude. I don't know what else to tell you. They're nutters, and they're
when we give them quarter like we have now, where everyone gets to be heard and no one gets to be told that they have to stand aside.
They're generally just
giving
ignored.
them quarter. The January 6th commission has been going on for how long, and we've seen absolutely jack shit out of it.
Which is not a point of centrists, I mean, not a point of leftists. That's a point of centrists not being willing to go fight. That means you're blaming leftists for things that centrists are doing, which is not fighting.
Because we can't get them to all show up and do the right thing to support the incrementalism that gets us a little bit closer to the security of our ideals.
But the problem is again, I would argue that numerically, that's a minority. It's like the myth.
It isn't.
No,
you are insulated.
No, it's not, because I have the numbers on my side. The people who were saying that Bernie Sanders supporters didn't show up for Hillary Clinton. And the problem is, yes, they did. They did show up to support Hillary Clinton. It is this myth on our side that there is some sort of hardcore communist left.
It's not a myth.
I mean,
it's not a myth when Bernie's people
centrist arguments for why to demonize the left.
It's not a myth when Bernie's people can't figure out how their fucking primaries work and vote correctly.
Oh,
It's
no,
not a
listen,
myth.
I'm
It's
not
not a
saying
myth,
I'm not
David.
saying these
David,
people are
it's
smart.
not a myth, David, when the only thing Alabama's progressives can muster is a bunch of videos after the fact talking about how we're human beings and we're just like you. Where the fuck was that work ahead of time? It's always reactionary. It's always too late. It's always the left waking up and saying, oh shit, I see how bad it could be, while I was busy over here jerking off on Twitter. Now, I brought Olivia's point up here to point out, yeah, be concerned about what Tucker Carlson has to say.
And
the problem is the dinks on Twitter are how Tucker is amplified to billions of people.
Boom. You wanted to maybe hold that one off. People can concern themselves with multiple priorities at a time.
Apparently not.
Well, no, in your worldview, you have an emotional reaction.
Apparently not.
This is one of the things where my academics
Just
gets to come into play, which is I can
Apparently
go back
not.
and look at the numbers and say, no, you feel that way about it. I get that you feel that way about it, but factually, you're wrong.
Let's
So-
examine that objectively. First of all, we keep the population too desperate to survive for them to have time to engage in more than one thing at once.
Well, no.
Then-
Thank you, social media. We've streamlined that process.
No, we haven't. So we haven't done shit.
and until
You're
Olivia's
not
point-
understanding this from a communications perspective, and that's why you're not getting what I'm saying.
Until Olivia's point,
And I think
but-
you're relying so much on emotion and personal experience. I mean, if personal experience was what I was working off of all the time, instead of going back and saying, okay, does this make sense to what I should be seeing? Then, I mean, I should be an ardent gun supporter. I should be probably a racist, right? I should be all these things if I was just making decisions based on what I personally observed. And yet I can go back and look at the numbers and say, this doesn't make sense. So maybe my experience is, in this instance, is tainted or colored by other things that I may have experienced or been a part of. I mean, I've been called out many times by trans people for not being sufficiently aware of their status as trans. And the thing is, instead of feeling guilty or wrong about the thing, I said, okay, it's been requested that I alter or moderate my behavior in a way to help them feel more comfortable. And does this really take any skin off my hide?
Well, let me give you
No.
a
And
tiny example.
And because, okay, and you're saying there's no emotion involved in that, but you're wrong, because you're an empathetic human being, you make the conscious choice to honor their request. Because if you had zero empathy and therefore zero emotion about it, you would just go, yeah, okay, whatever.
Well,
Let me explain something that happened in my presence a couple weeks ago. I went to a
another
formative...
anecdotal story. There we go.
Yeah, David,
But, hey,
whether you like it
Lucas,
or not, all
before you
these
dive
people
into
are
that.
motivated on anecdote.
Lucas, before you dive into that, Olivia, you should be worried about Tucker Carlson and Twitter because the man has 5.2 million followers.
Right.
Yep.
So I go to a formational meeting for a would-be makerspace here in Grand Rapids. There's a very quiet older man that's trying to put it all together. He's a little timid, and he also definitely doesn't want a cancel movement to come after him. The previous makerspace unfortunately closed under very, very icky circumstances. The person running it had some illegal activity all the way into some really nasty shit. I'm not going to go into all of it, but it was closed for very good reason. This dude wants to tread lightly. He needs people to support him, and he can't afford to be said in public that he was a bully to a trans woman. The person in the meeting that bullied everyone was a trans woman. It was a trans woman with all of the bravado and background testosterone and nerd elitism to take over every topic of conversation with a certain arrogance that is impossible to describe. And had he seized control over his meeting by shutting her down, it is very possible that he could have been dragged publicly for being too mean to a trans woman. And that, stop it, that fear, that withholding in our culture is what's wrong, because we can't handle shit like adults because one section gets a free pass to go cry that it was motivated by some other reason. And then 5.2 million people will take that as a sign that we on the left are way too broken.
No, okay. So then his I mean, here's the thing. If you already described him as timid, right? So he was already set up to be bullied by somebody. It was going to be somebody. It just happened to be a trans woman.
Yeah, the difference is if anybody else were shut down, no one would blink an eye. But if he went and said, "Look, ma'am, I need you to sit the hell down for a second and let us finish the sentence that we were saying," then she could go get on Twitter and say, "I went to the meeting and I was so offended. They are so anti-trans." And then she gets retweeted 6,000 times.
Anyway.
Then Tucker's 5.2 million people see those retweets, and then they go to the polls.
By you being constantly afraid of these rabid leftists, ignore them.
You can't, David.
Yes, you can. They are inconsequential.
No, David, you can't. You know why? You know why you can't, David? Because there's a very expensive lawsuit going on with Johnny Depp right now to fix it.
Okay, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to unpack just a little bit of that because we need to move on because we're running out of time. Johnny Depp is an asshole, but
not illegal.
No, but he's not guilty of the things that he was accused of.
Bingo.
The problem is that people are assholes, and people are assholes. That's
right.
it.
Yeah,
that's your whole issue, is that there's a difference between being an asshole and taking away someone's house, and being an asshole and just being an asshole. And
taking away someone's house.
You want to take the baton, that you want to take the nightstick and turn around on these people over
taking
here.
away someone's house, David. We live in a world where a person wrote a vague blog post and tried to take away two different people tried to take away not one but two different men's entire careers based on speculation. One of them stepped up and sued about it, but he's still never going to play the biggest role of his life ever again. And you think that's petty?
Well, in defense of that, once they cut him, he has said even if they come back to him,
sure,
because they cut him, he will never do
it. Yeah,
I
also want to point
not standing
out,
by him and waiting for the facts.
Yeah. This is how, I mean, if your money is based on your public persona, then you accept a certain level of risk, no matter what. If your money, I mean, you could be the most honest politician on earth, but you're still a politician. Your currency is still based on, I mean, character assassination. I mean, you're not talking about anything that's built out of woke culture. You're talking about something that goes back as far as the Roman Republic, something that goes back. Yeah, no, it does.
Mm-mm.
It does, Lucas.
But it doesn't work to the level that it works to this day.
No, it definitely worked that way.
Even in the 70s and the 80s, there was character assassination, but people didn't lose their jobs for it.
Oh, yes. Yes,
not as badly as it is today.
Yeah,
you're David, your job. It's a binary thing.
David, you have conveniently managed in your evaluation of this whole topic to skip the evolution of mass communication and then the era of social media. You are ignoring those two factors.
What I'm saying is that it's okay. If I want to go back to the Roman Republic, we still end up with the same situation of people having their character assassinated. A huge example.
The crier in the square.
No. I'm going to finish this idea, and then we really need to move on. But Caesar would sit there, and one of the great, a great comeuppance moment that happened during Caesar's career when he was consul is Cato. Cato was absolutely convinced as Caesar received a private message on the floor of the Senate that it was a letter from from Cato's wife, who he wanted to accuse Caesar of having an affair with, right? And he looked at the Senate, and these are the people who determine whether or not you're going to be in charge, right? These are the people who eventually voted to declare Caesar a traitor, right? I mean, they're going to kill him. And of course, Caesar picks up the note, and it's a love letter from his own wife. I mean, it's the problem is character assassination, and you all want to be like, oh well, Matt, mass media. Trust me,
Wait.
dude. In ancient times, it was just the same.
No, it
But
wasn't.
There's
did
no
okay.
fundamental difference.
But did Jim Bob in the western edge of the Roman Empire ever hear that story?
Oh, you bet he did.
Really?
Yeah.
Eh,
And did Jim Bob turn around and influence tens of thousands of other people to act in a very irresponsible way to vote?
They didn't have the vote. They could, however, act like assholes. But
You don't get to cherry pick your analogies, homie.
Well, no,
you know
because
what I'm
the problem
saying.
is
Look.
here's the problem. You want to empower people on one hand. This is the problem, and this is why you use the Roman Republic as an example. You want to empower people on one hand and say that they have all this authority and all this power. Everyone is government in and of themselves. Everyone is society in and of themselves. It's not just a small minority. Everyone is influencing everything to the nth degree. But then I turn it around and say, okay, here's a small group of people who have just as much authority, and they still are doing the same thing. It's not about
What
mass
you're not
media.
understanding
It's
is
just
no,
about
here, let me break
hearsay
this
and
down.
public opinion. That's it, and it's always been there.
But you're not reacting to the reaction. You're reacting to my gripe instead of understanding that I'm pointing out that we fuel these right-wing nutters by allowing our image of our side.
What I'm saying is that fuel is they'll invent the fuel. It's not real.
And Mark, I'm going to get you in here, but let me point out something I've said to you before, David. When I get down on religion, when I trash church, and you're like, "Hey, man, whoa, wait a minute. Don't be mean to all churches." I love to point out to people that say, all Christians aren't like that. I like to point out to them, you know what? You're all going to be like that until you tell the ones that are to shut the fuck up and quit badly representing.
And you don't pay attention to it. That's the problem. You're
true.
choosing to pay attention to one small minority as opposed to a different minority who is saying, hey, we don't do this. And we actively do that. There were no Baptist ministers at Chancellorsville, or pardon me, at Charlottesville. There were Episcopal priests, there were Methodist priests, there were Presbyterian priests putting their bodies in between leftist protesters and the police at Charlottesville.
Then show me a clip of one of them doing a press conference where they called out the Southern Baptists for not being there. Because that's what needs to happen.
His name is Reverend Barber. He does it a lot. He's
created
created an entire movement in North Carolina called Moral Mondays.
Having been raised,
choose not to pay attention to it. Instead, you want to pay attention to the absolute worst on your own side and simply blame that on why the right is doing their thing, instead of accepting the fact that they were going to do it anyway.
No, they weren't.
Got to be someone.
They were never going to elect Trump on their own.
Oh, yes, they were. They were always going to elect Trump on their own. And you need to blame someone for their own bad behavior.
Only because we allowed our side to screech so loudly about the wrong things were they able to get traction.
It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with you wanting to.
Right.
I apologize, Mark. We're both talking over you. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
Mark,
two quick things. Having been raised Southern Baptist, I'm fairly certain that some of the Southern Baptists weren't in that line of bodies because they were in the Jews will not replace us crowd. Okay,
true.
And I can speak to that from experience because there's people that go to my church that think that shit. Okay, which is why I don't go to church anymore. Number two, talking about the advance of social media and everything. I'm 48. 20 years ago, if I'd have done something stupid, I wouldn't have a TikTok account with 2,000 people liking the stupid, funny video that I posted. And I know that's a small number, but that's kind of sort of the expression.
Well,
as social media and mass media grows, our expansion, I would have never had somebody from freaking daggum Europe liking my shit that
Mark,
I was doing in my backyard.
Your 2000 is 2 million. That's the thing that David's not understanding about how this works. There are 10,000 people in your potential reach for every single person that you're connected to on any network.
Really? See, I didn't even look at that. I mean, I haven't even looked at my analytics, but I mean,
your analytics won't show that to you. You will never know how that number expands, but the current average theoretical expansion capability is 10,000 to 1. That's why it's so dangerous to allow dipshits to go unchallenged, even if they only have 20 followers. Because the person that screeches some
let's just shut down
nonsense.
social media. Let's just shut down social media. I
We
mean, that seems
could.
to be your only solution.
We could.
Yeah, that makes a ton of
And
sense.
that brings us full circle to what Brian was saying, and then we're going to jump off from Mark's point about replacement. Nixon resigned long before Twitter. And you know why Nixon resigned? Because the only mass medium at hand was a
Was the
fact-based, research-based, patient, and methodical journalism scene that put the pressure on him that caused him to have to step down, as opposed to an out-of-control rumor mill with zero facts, zero criminal proof, and nothing but mob mentality.
And I you know what? We can actually very much agree on that.
That is the problem I have, is that we rely on mob mentality to do every fucking thing. The right knows how to use it to win. The left knows how to not control it and still lose.
And personally,
I'll agree with that.
Like, and I'll have to agree with that, because I personally think that the problem with the majority of the problem nowadays is the fact that there's a 24-hour news media. They don't have time to
24-hour for-profit news media.
20
I mean,
yeah,
and the
for
thing
profit.
is, is it really? I mean, I'm going to leave this here, and then we really do need to move on. I'm going to leave this here real fast, which is it really 24 hours? Because if you actually sit and watch the news, the 24-hour news networks, there's a lot of repeating the same story over and over and over and over again.
Right.
It's not really 24-hour news.
But that's part of that formula, David.
Yeah, because the people that are at work at 5 o'clock don't get to see the bullshit at 5 o'clock, so we've got to replay it at 7 o'clock.
It's
so
beyond that, Mark.
The
the repetition to fill the time causes a crisis perception. If someone gives you the same 3 or 4 big time headlines every 30 minutes to an hour, it reads as more of a crisis than it really is. It's all part of a really fucked up and sick formula that we can't really afford to sustain. But let's drink a beer. This is a good time to drink a beer.
All right.
So it's time for another round. David,
I'm pulling it out of the cooler because I hadn't finished all that Mexican cake stout.
well, I'll start then to give you a little bit of a heads up.
Here, I'll try and chug this stout. Oh.
So I'm doing Screeching Sands Agave Amber. It's also from Big Heart, which I talked about, I think, last time. So the reason it's caught my eye was I usually do enjoy an amber, but I thought agave is an interesting twist, and I don't hate it. It's a little weird, but I don't hate it. I don't love it, and there's a reason I don't love it. It doesn't age well, as in 10 minutes from now when it's not really that cold anymore, it's not as good. And I think it's an interesting attempt to marry kind of a, for lack of a better way to describe it, like a margarita twist on an amber because of the presence of the agave. But it's not bad when it's cold. If you could slam this ice cold every time, it'd be great. But once it gets warmed up a little bit, it gets kind of lackluster, and it just doesn't quite do the trick for me. But I do like it initially out the gate. So what's your other one?
All right, so I can't chug that stout, so I'm drinking this from the can because I can't. Oh man, that's too much. But
that's okay. You have a cool can to show off.
Yeah, I do. I'm hanging out with another Mexican beer.
And it's Hoppin' Frog, you bastard.
And it's Hoppin' Frog. They have an entire wall of Hoppin' Frog now.
Well, at least I'm coming to Nashville in a couple of weeks,
and you can see the wall of Hoppin' Frog.
And go buy some of the Hoppin'
There's such
Frogs
an amazing, like they're such an inventive brewery, and I really do love them. And they definitely make a whole bunch of stuff that will make you talk shite and fall over. But this is their Saddle Rita Turbo.
Satlarita.
He just cannot say it.
I can't do it. I can't. It doesn't matter. We tried to do this in pre-show, and I can't say the name. I can't, somehow my tongue is just like,
you're just a wee bit too pale to pronounce your R's correctly.
Right? Satlarita. Turbo Shandy Citrus Ale, and is a aged in tequila barrels, so it ties in with your agave.
Cheers.
Cheers. Oh wow, it's a margarita.
I'm still drinking my Fireball.
That makes perfect sense.
It's a margarita. That's what it is. It's a watered down. It's a slightly watered down margarita. That's what I've got.
That makes absolute perfect sense.
Which, given what Hop and Frog normally produces, which is just like ridiculously high alcohol content beers that just like taste really good, but will absolutely destroy you. That makes sense. I have no idea what is the alcohol content on this. Let me see. Hold on.
It might not have to be very high to taste boozy with what's going on there.
No, it's 10%. It's 10%.
Oh, never mind. Well,
It's
let's do
Hop
a
and
poll
Frog.
check, fellas. Mr. Fetterman is the nominee. That's the big news from Pennsylvania.
What percentage is in?
We now get to watch the Hulk work. It's 38% in. They called it at something like 25%.
Yeah, because
okay.
the cities haven't finished reporting in, and they're all going to go hard Fetterman.
And 58% to 28%. So
yeah,
it's a pretty
okay,
straight
yeah,
margin. And not to mention the other guy, Lamb, but Lamb's trailed pretty bad there. Looks like North Carolina Senate has been called with Bud. What a North Carolina politician name, Bud, with two D's. Bud with two D's.
Bud.
Make
names,
sure
but no, you say that.
Make sure you get that extra
Cosby
D.
Show. You know, my name's Bud. Bud.
You know, I would turn it into Bud, but you know, do what you can. So anyway, you mentioned replacement theory wackos, Mark, and that leads us straight to the big thing that you suggested that we should dive into tonight.
Oh God.
Which is the Buffalo shooting. First of all, let's say what it is: the Buffalo mass shooting, and there are plenty of
we shouldn't call it the Buffalo mass shooting. We should call it the Buffalo terrorist attack.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's fair, but let's point out that there are a whole bunch of holster sniffing, gun fluffing, fucking firearm fetishes. They want to split hairs on what a mass shooting should or shouldn't be, and some of them have a problem defining this as a mass shooting, and I just can't fucking fathom that.
I have a problem with the fact that they haven't defined it as with the exception of a very few people defining it as terrorism. It's domestic terrorism.
It really should be,
you know. Yeah. And I also find it interesting that it kind of sort of ties into at least. Okay, so I was actually able to download a copy of the 180-page manifesto. I stopped reading at about page 20 because that's when it just got even more psychotic than the first 20 pages were.
That was where you could really feel your brain rot.
Yes. But the very first paragraph, I find interesting that it seems to it could also tie into the whole handmaid tale thing that we're dealing with the Supreme Court, because basically it says the main thing, what you need to know is that the white population needs to maintain a birth rate of 2.6 births per women.
Gimme.
Why?
Gimme. All right, this is mine. This is mine right now. This is mine because this is an economics issue. This is so easily an economics issue. Because we see the same thing time and time again. Throughout history, we see the same thing time and time again. There are two strategies when reproducing for any species, right?
I would think there was only one: sex.
But no,
you fuck and there's a baby.
Strategy number one.
Mark, I got to put on my business hat and my job hat for a second and make sure that I explain to you that is what we call a tactic, not a strategy.
Oh,
go ahead.
Yeah. The two strategies for any species to reproduce. One is make a bunch of kids and hope some of them survive. Second is have fewer kids, invest more resource per offspring, and increase the likelihood that each offspring survives. Now, there's very clear places where these strategies naturally evolve. If you're in a low resource environment, in other words, you don't have a lot of resources to raise young, then you spit out offspring like it's no thing. Why? Because some of them are going to live and find resources and some of them aren't, and that's okay. But some of them are going to survive. When you're in a high resource environment, then you do the opposite. You have fewer kids, you invest more resource per kid, and ensure the success or survival of each individual kid. Right? That's basic. If you're in
And that's where we are, right?
yeah, right. If you're in and typically in human civilizations, if you're in a stressed, low productivity agrarian environment, right? Like early colonial America or Renaissance France or Renaissance Spain or still Russia today, which is actually an outlier, and I'll explain why in a second. You just spit out kids because there's if you're in Spain, when I think of Spain, I don't think of look at all these verdant fields of grain. Oh wait, no, it's a high desert, it's dry, it's shit. Oh my god, I live in Spain. What am I gonna do? Well, before the colonies and before the New World, I just made a ton of kids, and some of them would survive. It's one of the reasons why everyone's like, "Oh, people didn't live past 30 in medieval Europe." It's because they looked at the numbers and they misinterpreted the numbers. No, a whole bunch of kids died, and then a whole bunch of people lived to be 60, 70, 80. But a lot of kids died. So the average age, if you look at the average, the average would be really low because, well, if you didn't make it past 2 or 3, you'd live a long time. But not a lot of you are going to live past 2 or 3.
So what's the economic motivation for this piece of shit with the N word written on his fucking rifle sights?
The problem is, whites in America have control of the vast majority of resources. That means that we don't make a ton of kids. We make fewer kids and invest more resources per kid. That's basic resource management and reproduction for anything. Even plants do the exact same thing, right? If you have a plant that exists in a high resource environment and does so for a while, it's going to make fewer offspring, but invest more resources in that seed pod to make a more successful offspring. A good example is the avocado, right? Have you seen the size of an avocado seed? It's huge. Or a peach, right? It's huge.
You mean the ball that you get to play with when you get an avocado?
Right. Except most Haas avocados are actually sterile. But real avocados, it's still a pretty, like the seed is actually bigger in natural avocados.
Avocados from Mexico.
Right? The seed is actually bigger, right? Because I have a ton of resources that people are giving me to grow. Great. I don't need to invest as much in my offspring, or I don't need to invest as much in making more offspring. I can make fewer offspring and feel fairly confident that they're going to survive. So
what you're getting at is this is a racist interpretation of the phenomenon you're describing, in that the at-risk populations are producing a lot, and the not at-risk white population is comfortably investing in fewer offspring.
Bingo.
That makes sense.
The main exception is when a population is naturally dying. When a population is naturally dying, then you will again see that same lower birth rate, but with lower resources. And the classic example of that we're seeing right now is Russia. Russia has no resources, and the birth rate is collapsing. And the reason why that's happening in Russia is the fact that there should be resources, but there aren't. And so the population is reproducing like there should be resources, which is to say very slowly, because they know what a standard of living is. They know how things should work. But on the same hand, there are no resources, and so they aren't reproducing at all. Russia is well below replacement population. It's ridiculously low below. Pardon me. Replacement population. Which is one of the ironies of Russia's invasion of Ukraine is they're sending all these marriageable age men off to die, and only increasing the demographic crisis by the fact that they aren't at home making kids.
You're saying that what you perceive as an economics and I don't know what the right word here would be, sociological, biological phenomenon is being misinterpreted through a racist nationalist lens.
Oh yeah,
by these people. And I look at it and think, I don't care why. I think that the fact that they care is fucked up.
Well,
you just talked about Russia, and I'm over here going, and it's not just because I have a big hate boner for Russia right about now. I'm over here going, okay, so what? Like, I just generally look at any population of humans as a category, especially white ones, and I think I don't fucking care. If
I also want to point out another key indicator of that is one of the first things that you see in a society that has a respectable middle class. One of the first things you see that is developed a solid middle class.
I mean,
contraceptives.
Okay.
Contraceptives. When the English economy,
basically you're saying family planning,
right? When the English economy finally,
if you would say,
right, when the English economy finally got to the point where it had a reliable middle class about the time of Charles II, birth rates started to decline in cities dramatically, because people were using contraceptives. They weren't just using contraceptives because of disease. I mean, they were using them because of disease and a variety of other things, but they also wanted to control how many kids they had, because they could, as middle class, they could invest in the survival of each child.
I got another reason for that, David. It's called the our household reason. One kid, because we're fucking selfish and want to have a life. There's a certain decision that you get to make if you're empowered to say, you know what, one kid's plenty for us, because now we can still have a life. We have a teenager. We have a teenager that we've raised pretty well. We can go a couple hours away and have a good time for the day and know that the house is probably not going to burn down and nobody's having to watch their fucking crotch fruit fucking siblings while we're gone. And so I think there's a certain amount of selfish interest that you're allowed to have when you don't have the pressures that you just described. But instead of going out and trying to figure out how many black people I can shoot in a grocery store, I'm just content to say, yeah, whatever. He's highly likely to end up with a brown girl if he ends up straight. We don't really know.
Well, I mean,
and reproduce little half brown children, and that's okay by me.
Consider this:
if white people disappear.
So, for the record, just and I love the fact that David went off on this huge tangent that this shooter didn't mention at all in his manifesto. There was nothing about economics in his manifesto.
Well, that's because he doesn't understand what he's interpreting.
I know. But, you know, at the heart of it, he's just the white man is being outbred.
Well, right. But again, that's not statistically true, because here's one of the things that's really funny.
Statistically, Caucasians only make up roughly 10% of the population of the entire planet.
Well, there's that, but yet they make up still about 65 to 70%, depending on which measure you're using, of the American population.
Right.
That's one of the things that
this idiot identifies as European.
Right. And I want to talk, and I want to talk to that in just a second about that bullshit. But consider for the fact that we've been asking black people to breed as much as possible for 200 years. 200 years before we ended slavery, right?
Well,
make as many babies as you can. And yet, even with all the black people we brought over and telling them to make as many babies as you can, they still only make up less than 20% of the population. How the hell does that work? Oh, that's right, because most of their kids died, right?
Well, because we tend to, execute.
And even today, the death rate among African Americans at much earlier ages is consistently higher. many African Americans have argued that Social Security is inherently racist. And the reason it's inherently racist is because Black people pay into Social Security at the same rate as white people, but Black people typically do not ever garner as much as they put in because white people live longer.
That's an interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Um,
Hey, Mark, I want to walk through some of that manifesto since I haven't read it, and I know I'm not the
I
only
should have
one.
sent y'all a copy ahead of time.
Well,
It took me
No,
forever.
no, I
to
don't
find
need to read it.
I mean, I've read the
fine.
Christ Church Manifesto, so I've read this manifesto.
I don't
I'll
need
be
to
honest.
read it.
It's pretty
I
similar.
want
to the
I
Christ
want
Church.
you to tell us your highlights. That's what I want to know.
So the highlights of it are basically so he's got several sections. He's got a section that's like questions and answers, and then it's a section of questions for my detractors and questions for people who think like me.
Which that whole format
yeah.
amazes me. As a card carrying narcissist, that's some shit.
Yeah, and it pretty much is. So first off, like, why did you decide to carry out this attack? To show the replacers that as long as the white man lives, our land will never be theirs, and they will never be safe from us. To reduce immigration rates to European lands, to intimidate the replacers already living on our lands to immigrate back to their homes, so on and so forth. Your overall goal, what do you want?
Our land. Let's just hold on the phrase "our land."
I'm pretty sure the Iroquois, Cherokee, Powhatan,
Our land that we stole from some brown and red folks.
Here's what I love. So this guy, he says that he's a white European is what he identifies himself as. I really want them to compel a DNA test on him just to show him how not white he is.
Oh, that would be pretty. Well, I mean, it would be falling on deaf ears, but that would be very interesting.
No, I just to show it to him and watch him cry. I mean, that
it would be fun to be the fly on the wall when they show him the one black person in his family tree, right?
Basically his overall goal was to ensure the existence of our people and a future for white children. He represents millions of European and other ethno-nationalist peoples that wish to live in peace amongst their own people on their own lands.
Which doesn't actually ever work out.
Are none of their own lands.
I know. Yeah, we'll ignore his stupidity for a moment.
These people have none. None of these are our lands.
Yeah. Why he chose to target these people specifically is that they are obvious, visible, large group of replacers from a culture with a higher fertility rate and strong, robust traditions that seek to occupy my people's lands and ethnically replace my own people. Sorry, hiccuped. Let's see here.
That's what you
this is the fun one. This is the best one I love. Do you consider the attack an act of terrorism? By definition, yes, but I believe it's a partisan action against an occupying force.
Oh, holy hell! He admitted it. It might as well be called terrorism. Here, I want to hold on one of the topics you just touched on because it's always been a problem. Big black dick syndrome. He has that falling all over what you just described.
Oh yeah.
There's such a long history of white men acting in racism because they're afraid the savage is going to ruin their white women, aka they're going to show up with some big black dick and she ain't never gonna go back.
You know what the irony about that is, because I love numbers, and these are things that occur to me.
You're gonna point out the statistic that the big black dick is somewhat of a myth.
It is a myth, actually. On average, simply because there's more of them, at least in America. On average, white dicks are bigger. I just want to point that out. I just thought point that out on average because
David's minor contribution to the discussion of dicks is to make sure that we remember that there are black men or there are white men that are hung, and he wants us to definitely remember that, ladies.
No, because the thing is, it's
not him, but there are.
It's just a silly thing. I mean, like the entire thing is just silly.
Yeah.
I mean,
I want to highlight real quick Olivia's point here. Connecting back to the baby formula topic, the entire reason the shipping the formula to the border thing took off the way it did, and she's acknowledged her typos, but we're cool. We understand everybody's trying to get the comment in, and shit doesn't always happen because it's a one or a 2-for-1 punch, dehumanizing immigrants and designating them as lesser than us, and getting to blame a minority for our own damn issues, and that's so incredibly accurate, and it does overlap this fucking manifesto shit. I mean, every time I hear a new piece of this fucking story, I'm a little bit. We need a word. We have Schadenfreude. That's a big ass word for something that I am. Oh, for fuck's sake! I am never going to not say Schadenfreude because that's what Avenue Q taught me. Fuck off.
Avenue Q pronounces it Schadenfreude. You need to listen to the song again.
Good God. Anyway, everyone's
wrong.
racist sometimes.
Everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. Doesn't
So,
mean we go
all
around
right.
committing crimes. Okay, sorry.
Basically,
speaking of which,
the thing that blows my mind, and I don't know, we need a word for this. It's a word for being surprised but not surprised. We need to find that word because that's what happens every time I see a new entry into this story. The N-word written on his damn rifle sight. Like, on one hand, I'm like, okay, that's not at all surprising. On the other hand, I'm like, really?
I'm fairly certain that if there is a word for that, the Germans created it.
Yeah, the Germans seem to be good at nuanced emotional terminology, weirdly enough. So this is definitely, you're right. You are absolutely right, Mark. This is definitely classifiable. And I think we need to be quicker to jump to the conclusion of terrorism. I think we need to be quicker to say, as official government and agency positions,
See,
this is domestic terrorism.
but that's the problem. He's white. They will never call it terrorism.
And that is a big piece of it. But that also figures into the thing that I read today, which, again, surprise,
even though he called it terrorism.
The apparently the people calling 911 from the store were met with hostility from the emergency operators.
Oh, I had not heard that one.
Apparently, the culture is in their law enforcement and first responder culture is so institutionally racist that the assumption was
oh no, say it.
The assumption was panic over nothing. I'm waiting. You keep making noises that overlap me, and people.
Sorry, I apologize. No, hey, listen. Me and Mark are going to just randomly interrupt you as we see fit. All right, so that's how this is going to work.
So apparently,
hell, I've been having a fight to talk this whole damn show. What are you talking about?
Apparently, the 911 response was, "Oh, panic over nothing," and that is patently unacceptable. Like the fact that anybody exists in a community where they can't call and be really urgent and be taken seriously, astonishing and absolutely not acceptable. Olivia points out, apparently, oh boy, conmocionado in Spanish conveys the idea of being shocked but without the implied connection of being surprised. I like it. I will probably never remember it, but conmocionado. I am hopefully going to look that one up and learn it.
I mean, I'm trying to find a word. So far, I'm finding nothing that really fits. But, so yeah, more from this. Like he, are you a fascist? Yes. Are you a white supremacist? Yes. Are you racist? Yes. Are you anti-Semitic? Yes, in bold with exclamation points and a whole bunch of anti-Semitic bullshit behind that.
What is wrong with these people? Most Jews are white as fuck.
Are you a neo-Nazi? I support neo-Nazism, but I'm not a member of any group. He says he's not conservative. He says conservatism is a corporation in disguise. I want no part of it. But yet, a lot of his viewpoints are very conservative.
Well, I mean, I think there's often I'm going to chime in here with a political ideology metric here. There's conservatism, neoconservatism. neoliberalism, liberalism. So conservatism, classic conservatism, is actually very much in line with his thinking. It's where the Republican Party wants to go park itself these days, is in actual what's called classical
I'm
conservatism.
getting to that, Olivia.
Olivia asked, "Is he libertarian?"
The thing is, libertarians aren't
I'd put some
actually
money on it.
libertarian because, well, they're stupid. They're the dumbest people that I've ever met in my entire life. Who try their hardest to sound smart, but they are in fact very, 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 very stupid.
Classic sideline poo throwers that think they're better than the game. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's like my classic analogy. Like they're the guys who show up to the 15 items or less line with 16 items and are convinced that someone is working to overthrow them,
Right.
and regulate them. It's just like, you knew it was 15 items or less. I don't what.
I believe there should be a law that if we're in line behind somebody in the 15 or items less line and they have 17 items, we should be able to bitch slap them
Or go in front of them.
Yeah, no, I just believe it's
you guys keep the banter up. I'm going to pull a David.
Okay. So let's see here, Olivia, for your question, what are your views? I would prefer to call myself a populist, but you can call me an ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist,
ethno-nationalist.
Ethno-nationalist, eco-fascist, national socialist if you want. I wouldn't disagree with you.
All right. And you know, again, I know you want to talk about his manifesto, and I get why.
I'm not. Yeah, I have no desire to read all of it, but I'm just kind of hitting the highlights.
I want to kind of pull back just a little bit from that, because at the end of the day, this is the same manifesto that we heard when and for those of you who don't know, because I referenced it earlier, a couple of years ago, a white nationalist in New Zealand killed 50 people in Christchurch, New Zealand, starting in a mosque.
Yep. And he actually references him in the manifesto.
And most of this is cribbed from his manifesto.
Yeah.
Because even he referenced, he's like, well, this guy actually said everything I wanted to say without saying it. And honestly, I gotta be honest. Like, if I'm being 100% objective and pulling all the bullshit out, I can see how someone in New Zealand would be far more scared of immigrants because it's such a smaller population. I'm not condoning it. I want to be very clear about this. I'm not condoning it, but I can understand the mindset, right? I can get myself to the point where I'm like, you're scared. Does that condone your violence? No, it doesn't condone your violence at all. But I get where this is entirely foreign to you, right? This whole idea of immigration, of people who are not white coming to your country. Even though New Zealand has the Treaty of I'm gonna butcher this name, and I do apologize to any Kiwis who are watching. But Treaty of Wanatangi, which establishes certain rights for native New Zealanders, and has been there for generations since the foundation of the colony. I get where that can seem just simply jarring for a New Zealander, and they respond like fucking assholes. This, on the other hand, is America,
right?
Where we arrived in a post-apocalyptic wasteland, which is one thing that most Americans don't understand about how our relationships with Native Americans worked, which was, 100 years before the first colonies were established, explorers were describing the fact that you could see the entire coastline from Georgia to Massachusetts by the campfires along the coast. And then once they got a taste of smallpox and influenza, well, yeah, the reason things didn't go exactly as we expected is we weren't dealing with normal, like, people. when we arrived. We were dealing with the Mad Max motherfuckers that just survived a pandemic apocalypse. Because everyone was fucking dead. Which is
So-
the only.
I want to jump on the gun thing for a minute.
I was about to talk about that. So one of the
has
questions
to do with the gun thing, and he had legally obtained guns, and he had no red flags,
which is
and that checks out. It's all the more reason why we should be getting away from assault or assault style, whatever fucking bullshit phrase you want to use to describe it. We should be getting away from that. We should be sticking with handguns for personal protection, long rifles when you're a hunter.
And I also want to point out, it's about to get so much worse.
What do you mean?
Oh, you haven't heard yet.
I mean, I might have heard, but I might have sidelined it, considering I'm in a city that's fighting about cops and killing
The army
suspects.
is getting a new rifle.
Oh,
which means they'll start making the M16.
You mean the M4? It's not. We haven't made the M16 in over a generation.
Right. Yeah. But that means that puts the M16 closer to being street legal.
Well, no, the M4 is already street legal. Yeah. It's just called an AR-15, or an AR-15 carbine.
Right.
But no, we've moved to a new round, which we're about to introduce to NATO and get all of NATO to switch over, which is more deadly and has farther range.
What round is that?
6.8 millimeter.
Oh, fun. Okay. Like 5.62 wasn't enough. Okay, fair enough.
Right. Because the problem is that after Afghanistan, and we realized people were outranging us with AK-47s, we're switching to a new Sig Sauer assault rifle platform with a 6.8 millimeter round.
Well, yeah, because AKs are 7.62s.
So this prick, proving.
Speaking about the gun, real quick before you go off, one of the questions he throws in here is, why did you choose firearms? And I love his answer because it just speaks to the point that we're trying to make. Because they work. There are very few weapons that are easier to use and more effective at killing than a firearm.
All right,
especially the Bushmaster XM15 I will be using.
And I'm going to jump in real fast.
Oh boy,
Lucas, I'm going to take over real fast because I want to point out about this new rifle. Because again, if you hate people, you forget they exist. If you hate a thing, you know everything you can about it. And I fucking hate guns. I loathe guns. I will shoot guns. I understand all sorts of things about guns. Most people will be like, "Oh, you don't know." Yes, I can actually strip and rebuild an AR-15. I've taught myself how to do that because I want to know why I should hate this thing for being what it is. The new Sig Sauer platform, I want to point out, with a 6.8 millimeter. It's a bigger weapon. It's a bigger bullet that engages further. But it also means that all those M4s that were in Army supply are now about to be released onto the civilian market.
Why?
Hey, because Lucas, people have to defend their homes with a gun that can engage a target at 300 yards.
First of all, are those
600 yards?
Are they automatic?
Well, no, effectively at 300 yards.
Right, are they automatic?
Effectively 600 yards because, if they miss, it could go into the house next door.
Are they automatic?
They will not be automatic.
No, they're automatic as far as military use, but I mean, you can buy ghost gun parts to make them fully automatic.
Yeah, it's very easy to turn them automatic.
Yeah.
But
I really okay. So back to the thing. So there's always a deflection. There's always you can do whatever you want with the laws. The criminals will still have guns.
Apparently, that doesn't stop them with abortion. Or I don't know, tax fraud, or any other law.
I refuse to accept
food safety laws
concept.
Well, we can pass a law about food safety,
and I refuse to accept that concept because we don't base anything on that, like you just said. And the ship sailed. I keep coming back to this. The ship sailed. These fucking gonna say the word that nobody likes me to use. These fucking retards, and their fantasy, their fucking fever dream hard on fantasy, that they're gonna climb onto the tin roof of their trailer and they're gonna, no offense, Mark,
Hey.
they're gonna defend their property from the evil empire of Uncle Sam with their guns.
Yeah, because
That
that will
ship
help when the tank rolls
sailed.
up and rolls through the trailer.
Ask the Fedayeen how well that worked.
It's really funny to see these dumb fuck white racist nationalist pricks use a logic that they support the inverse. When it comes to black populations and militarizing the police, they support the inverse for police to outarm themselves against the brown people. But when it comes to them, they have this fantasy belief, this fucking Bruce Willis movie fucking playing in their head, that they're going to climb up on the roof and they're going to defend their property against the invasion of the oppressive government. Long ago, before I was born, the government was capable of fucking you up whether you liked it or not. And the ship sailed a long ass time ago. That is a flimsy excuse for tiny dicked gun fetish assholes to be able to justify this ridiculous idea.
I want to point out, everyone who's lived through a federal raid, please raise their hand.
Yeah, no, not me, but you worked for the government and for a Republican.
Oh, no, I've lived through a federal raid. Like I've had the ATF show up with automatic weapons before, right? And I'll tell you, if I thought I was going to sit there with an AR-15 and guard that door, which first of all, they weren't coming for me. I just want to clarify, they were not there for me. I had no idea what was going on. I'm like, hi, okay, this is happening.
So, Mark, what were you about to say?
But
it goes back to what Christopher Titus said. You know, nowadays we've got drones, we've got tanks, they've got a bullet that they can write your name on it, and it goes, "Oh, is that Lucas?" Bam, he's dead.
Yeah, but these guys walk around with their jacked up pickup trucks and 2 American flags on the back corner and all their rifles.
No. It's not 2 American flags. It's 1 American flag and 1 Confederate flag.
Right.
And
I would also
flag in the middle. I forgot that one.
I would also like to point out the fallacy of the good guy with the gun will stop the bad guy with the gun, because one of the 10 people that was killed in Buffalo
was a
cop that tried to stop him and got shot.
He was the official good guy with a gun,
and his ass is dead.
So one of my favorite little pastimes now that I'm here is to troll the social media posts from the shitty local media here in West Michigan. And
oh God,
on this topic, not this topic. There was a toddler shot here in West Michigan last night before, something like that.
Oh shit!
And it was apparently an accidental discharge. So my comment on the story was, "Oh, I see the good work is being done again by another responsible gun owner." And one of the people responded to me and they said something about, that must have been the good guy with the gun not taking good care of it. And then someone else said, "Well, the good guy with the gun didn't last long in Buffalo, did he?" Yeah, that's the point. But he was at least the official good guy, the good guy that these dickholes with their John Wayne fantasies imagine is a fucking cowboy. And I think, David, didn't you have something where you were talking about like indiscriminately firing or
right? One of the problems is more often than not when we have the good guy with the gun scenario, it's more bystanders get hit than the actual guy.
The more bullets
I've never been in a firefight,
the more casualties you will have.
I've never been in a firefight, right? I have never been in a situation where I have had a weapon with me and had to pull it and trade fire with someone else firing at me. I've never had that happen. In fact, I would argue that 99.2%, because Iraq and Afghanistan happened. Let's say 99% 99.2% of the American population have never been in a situation in which they've had to trade fire with someone shooting at them. Now, one of the cool things that happens in combat is, well, you've got people with you who are firing in the same direction, right? If you're in a restaurant, like, I get really tweaked out when people walk into my restaurant and they have, and because again, Tennessee now has this weird ass fucking concealed carry law that allows you to conceal carry everywhere. But I'm gonna hope
Even in a bar?
even in a bar,
Oh yeah,
yeah, even in a
Fuck.
bar, you can conceal carry in a bar. You can
they made a
conceal
big
carry-
deal out of that.
Yeah, they made a big.
These fucking psychos really want you to be able to have a gun and booze combined.
Well,
Yeah,
but the whole thing is that, well, at least some of the people I've seen walk in who are openly carrying, I get tweaked out about, because I'm like, I don't want you in my bar. I don't want you anywhere near alcohol. I don't want you anywhere near people who've had alcohol.
That's the real rub.
Right. And my twitch is that, all right, so you feel threatened and now I have a gun in play, right? In a situation that I can't control, that no one can control, it's just going to spiral radically out of control.
Not to mention the fact that when that person walks into your bar, you don't know if they are the good guy with the gun or if they're the
Bingo.
next mass shooter.
I mean, and I'll
You
tell
don't know. So
I'll
now
tell-
you feel threatened.
I'll tell you who it is who keeps on showing up is, and I hate to call them out because I think they're actually nice people, except for guns, is Black Rifle Coffee.
Huh?
Which I don't know.
It's a coffee brand, Black Rifle Coffee.
I don't know if you know Black Rifle Coffee.
It's
Black
like
Rifle
a
Coffee.
it's like
I don't
a
drink coffee,
veteran-owned kind of deal, right?
Yeah, and they make a big deal about going everywhere with their guns. They make a big deal about going everywhere with the guns. Now, apparently,
I
they
don't know
are
if I
in
want
favor.
people tweaked out on coffee carrying.
They
though.
are in favor of some level of gun control. But if you go and look at their commercials on YouTube, it's just yeehaw bullshit of moderately attractive blonde women and fat white guys shooting guns.
Which let me unpack that one since it's my business. That is some classic advertising theory, right? It's the same as porn. You put these less than 10, less than A-list men in scenarios where they're adjacent to or involved with hot chicks. And that happens in these gun fucking scenarios, and it happens in porn, and it happens in beer. There are a variety of places where it happens. Now, some of them are not false. A Maserati ad with a less than stellar dude with lots of hot girls is an accurate fucking representation of what happens when you have a Maserati.
Oh yeah. By the
However,
way, if you own a Maserati, you should feel bad, and you are bad.
yeah, but the only vehicle whose sound has been scientifically proven to dampen
it's such a
women's
piece of
crotch.
shit.
You can say that all you want.
I know the engine sound and the muffler sound work out very well. And honestly, if I had a choice between a Maserati and a Ferrari, I would choose a Maserati because it's at least slightly more mechanically functional.
That's fair.
But it's still goddamn, like, drive it
Well, and
300
apparently
miles.
it outruns a Batmobile. For those that are pissed that I said that a few weeks ago on social media, sorry, big spoiler. Yeah,
It's all right. I went and finally saw Multiverse of Madness today, and
Oh dear God,
did you?
I did.
I saw
Okay.
it the other day.
And for
I was
those
not-
of you who don't want spoilers or my opinion about it, look away.
No,
off your sound.
don't do this. Don't do this. We're talking about guns. We can't talk about multiverses. It'll get too weird. That being said, I got tickets to the first showing of Top Gun available next week, and I'm looking forward to it. But anyway,
Back to the point. I mean, it's the good guy with the gun is obviously a myth, and I get worried
it's horseshit.
when anyone walks into my place of business with a gun, because now you're my problem. I don't understand. Like people who should honestly be like, well, I'm a good guy. Don't show up to my place of work with a fucking firearm then.
Well, the reality is, for a lot of these good guy with a gun douchebags, this guy, this shooter, was the good guy with the gun. And that's the problem. And, in reality, that's what they picture. They picture this well-armed, well-armored fucking prick. Jesus Christ, David, what are you doing to us?
Sorry, I was trying to merge myself out.
You keep moving yourself around here.
It's musical nerds.
So, good guy with a gun theory. None of these fucking pricks regard that black off-duty or ex-cop who was serving as a security guard as the good guy with the gun. And in their mind, this cheeseball, mama's basement, redheaded stepchild, fucking white supremacist piece of shit with all his body armor and his Desert Storm fucking boots, he's the good guy with the gun. And they're going to barely admit that he committed a crime because in the end, they approve of his agenda.
Oh, no, it's either it's mental illness or video games is the current right talking point. Is
instead of blaming the prop source, which is replacement theory propagandists like Tucker Carlson, who was our title card guy for tonight's show. That's really where the issue is. It's these fucking demagogues repeating these ridiculous messages about what we started off talking about, whether you view it as social or economic or perception or whatever, ultimately replacement theory, which is fucking bullshit. It's been one of the few things that I've ever said about my critique of Star Trek is the huge inaccuracy in Star Trek. And I know, Mark, Star Trek's one of our unified passions. So I think you'll probably agree with this criticism. Of course, for me to criticize is rare. You criticize Star Trek more than I do. I believe Star Trek has been false from the beginning because all the people have separate racial identities. By the time Star Trek happens, we'll all be a shade of brown.
Probably not.
That's something that interests me in these perceptions or these presentations of the future of regular Earth-based humanity.
I also
there are way too many white people because by the time you get to the 24th century, most people should be a shade of brown.
I'll be honest, probably not.
I can halfway agree with that. But at the end of the day, you are still going to have people who are not going to want to associate romantically outside of what they identify as.
And that's true, but in the Star Trek continuum, a
but
lot
I
of them
will
ended
agree
up
with
on
you
sleeper
that
ships.
yes, there should be more representation by that time.
I also want to point out that logically, at least in terms of genetics, it's going to take like 3,000 or 4,000
logically.
3,000 or 4,000 years.
Logically, it could take 3,000 or 4,000 years for this.
You don't think 400 years is enough to make a dent in the Caucasian? Like, let's take your pale ass. I don't really expect to see
take
you.
Take note before you start talking about 400 years. The original series is roughly 200 years from now.
Yeah, good point. So,
here's the thing. Miscegenation, which I hate to use that word, but it is the combining of two different races, right? Miscegenation, on average, produces a very mixed result of white and darker skin. So it's highly likely, given the success of pale faces like me, that there's still going to be a lot of us around.
That's a good point. That's a fair point. And Mark, I know you think we're way off topic, but I had a reason for bringing it up.
Okay, thank you.
That potential future is the nightmare of these pieces of shit. And
Oh, agreed.
When we elected Obama, I had the thought in my head, boy, we are starting the period of time in American history where the tantrum will be beginning.
Oh,
And
and
I
it
think
began in earnest.
where we are right now is we are seeing all of the worst of the tantrum of the white supremacists, the future irrelevance of old and white people. There's an outright fucking bananas throwdown tantrum going on, and that's how we have Trumps and Tuckers and all these shootings and inward on the sights of the guns and replacement theory. To me, it's all part of something that I expected 10, 15 years ago to see in my lifetime, which was a complete outright white person's tantrum in our culture.
Have you not read David Marcus's whole-on condemnation of Strange New Worlds? Oh my God! So this opinion columnist.
Oh wait, are you talking about the thing where they're saying that Star Trek is too woke?
Yeah,
Yeah, which is like to just miss all of Star Trek ever because it's
Ever,
always been woke.
right. But one of the main things that he points out is like, oh, they talk about the second Civil War, which I'm going to be honest.
Oh, no, God, yeah, that scene I know triggered him. I'm
Yeah,
fairly certain it triggered a whole bunch of
which,
people.
I mean, because that's always one of my points that I like to point out, which is that um, the right in America, just like in Buffalo, just like in all these other things, they expect to trigger a second Civil War. That's the entire purpose of their action, is to trigger a second Civil War. The entire purpose of their supporters in Congress is to trigger a second Civil War.
But heaven forbid you call them on it.
Well, yeah. Well, oh, don't. We're not trying to trigger. No, you are actively, by your own words, trying to trigger a second Civil War because you're convinced that if you launch it now, you can win. By the way, you can't.
Democrats own guns too.
Well, no, I mean, I think we've gone into this a couple of times on the show, which is like logistically, monetarily, tactically, strategically, there is no hope for a conservative victory in a new civil war. It's just going to be at the very best for their cause, a long drawn out affair. More than likely, it will not be that long or drawn out. It will just be them losing very, very, very badly.
Well, I keep pointing out to these people that are like, like Texas should secede from the Union, so on and so forth. I'm like, okay, fine.
Go
You
ahead.
can do that.
Good luck.
The United States government will close every military base in Texas and withdraw their troops. So now you have no army. Except for the people who deserve
the reason that they won't do it is it's very simple. What happens the moment Texas secedes? A border goes up from Louisiana to Arkansas to Oklahoma,
right,
to Kansas to New Mexico.
And we disconnect them. Well, they're not connected to the national power grid, which is why they're having brownouts right now.
Right, but the problem is that they can no longer trade their goods
right
across our borders. Number one, number two, the oil that they produce. I mean, like
actually, the oil that they don't produce, because you got to remember the 3 parts of the Keystone Pipeline that are working are pumping oil into Texas to be shipped somewhere else.
Right, there is that. But I mean, on the other hand, you have to remember that they don't produce enough food to feed themselves.
Nope.
They don't produce enough goods to supply themselves. All those come from someplace else. They would have to renegotiate trade treaties with everyone. And oh, by the way, we're pissed at them. So who do I want to trade with more? Texas or the rest of the United States?
Or Canada?
Might want to trade with the rest of the United States as opposed to a rebel province. I mean, Taiwan at least can turn around. The reason Taiwan has protection is because Taiwan produces a vast majority of our computer chips. So yeah, we're not going to let China take Taiwan. Taiwan made my earbuds that I bought today.
Yeah.
That were smaller and nicer than the ones I had before. Those came from Taiwan. I know.
I keep
Because it said it on the box.
I keep wishing that they would. I just really do. Let them do it. Fuck them. And all of a sudden, they're going to have to become a lot more friendly to Mexico.
Well, no, you know the thing that's going to kill them. Absolutely kill them. It's actually very simple. What happens to your Social Security check?
Oh yeah.
Oh, what
like,
happens?
Like everybody in Texas who is
happens to
getting any
Social
money
Security check?
from the federal government?
Yeah. What happens? What happens to the U.S. Postal Service?
Bye.
Right.
What happens to the U.S. Border Patrol?
Bye.
Like I said, real
No,
fucking.
it moves to that line that you just differentiated about around Louisiana and all that.
It's all gone. It's all gone.
Oh, David, you just gave me the most beautiful mental image. Little fucking Texas white children in cages at the border of Louisiana. Anyway, I think that beautiful mental image is probably a great place for us to leave off.
We need to quit. We are so far over time.
We definitely have to call it
over time. We are.
Mark, thanks for joining in the fray, man. We
Thanks
really
for having
appreciate you being here and bringing up this topic.
Yes, thank you very much, Mark. We sincerely appreciate every guest who comes on.
If you're out there, please do like,
subscribe,
share, subscribe, do all the things.
Do all this. Do that. Like and subscribe. Do it.
This is merely a passion project. This is an activity of patriotism and obligation. And
I also want to point out something for everyone who watches. In case you haven't noticed, we don't disrupt your entire viewing with any sort of sponsor video, mostly because we would not ask anyone to sponsor anything that we fucking do.
Well, not yet, at least. Well, I'm hoping that one day we find someone with the balls, but we won't ask the beer brands because we want to be able to freely review a like or dislike. We don't ever want to be really.
Maybe we can talk the Young Turks into it, but I'm pretty sure that they need the money.
But we'll cross that bridge if we ever come to it. Right now, we're just happy to do our duty as citizens and have some discourse, and we're glad to see everybody stop in and drop in their 2 cents. So, Mark, hang out in the green room with us for just a few minutes. We'll be right with you. But right now, it's time for us to do the thing, David, and it's time to wish the folks at home good night,
good evening,
and good luck.